right, welcome to the Kubernetes Committee Steering Committee Election 2024 retrospective. Say that 3 times fast. We are governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct and are choosing to meet to talk through all of the things that went well and things to improve to ensure that we run the best possible elections for our community. I am sharing the doc. Let's see if I can find it. All right. I am sharing the doc. Let's see if I can find it. All right. Sharing this retro doc, and I think one way to walk through this is for us to talk about the stuff that's already on there, but pause in each section so that people who did not put things in text ahead of time can say anything that they want to say, and then I will take some notes while we talk. So yeah, should we start with things that went well? Turnout was up. And we had 233 voters this time compared to 209 voters last time. And I do credit that to Christoph remembering that GitHub has this banner feature. I'm not even sure if the banner feature has something to do with org changes that we made. Perhaps somebody can weigh in if they know. Like, I'm not sure if
Yes.
that was available in the past. Is that a new
Yes.
availability?
So,
Okay.
so with the
Yeah.
migration to GitHub Enterprise Cloud, you have banner features. So
Nice.
we're only recently a GitHub Enterprise Cloud member.
Awesome. So I think that I don't know if that transition even happened during the election or not, but like now that we know it exists and we'll have it available for next year, I would suggest that one item that we do is run that banner through the entire election. Because we only added it at the end because we thought of it and knew it was available. But making people aware of it via GitHub is a great thing ahead of time.
Uh,
Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
Go for
Yeah,
it, Kyla.
thanks. So I know I think it's great that voter turnout was up, but is our contributor numbers also the same? Like we do that number, I believe, does fluctuate as well for us yearly with people dropping off or people
Yeah,
being added.
absolutely. So we would look at the line count in voters.yaml, and I can take that question offline and get you an answer while we continue to talk. I know that voters.yaml was like 600 something this
Yeah,
time, and I don't have them.
right. It's down.
Yeah, we
From
have
last
an
year.
answer for this because we look at it by percentage of current
Oh, fantastic.
contributors. So, and it's been between like 27 and 30% for the last several elections. I wouldn't actually say that our numbers increased by percentage. I'm going to look right now though.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
Yeah,
it's a higher percentage because our number of org members is down.
Okay.
Got it.
At least
All right.
according to the post that was made at the end of the election.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
there were also some chats. I forgot exactly which channel it was in, but someone had mentioned that it was we had an increase, but I'm not sure that it is a celebration based on
Yeah. I don't mean to be a downer on it, but
Oh, no, that's fine.
yeah, I think it's something that like it's been for me, at least in my observations, I feel like it has been like plateauing. It's been at a plateau actually for a few years, and I think that's the thing to like figure out how to actually do that move of much higher.
Wait, let me clarify what I was saying. The percentage is actually higher. But the percentage is higher partly for a bad reason, which is our number of validated org members is lower.
Right. Okay.
So the election committee, the election officers did a great job of slightly increasing turnout for, I think, actually the first election in the last 4 years. But it points to a larger problem for Kubernetes as a whole.
Okay, good point.
Now, I mean, this is maybe a conversation for another call, but we're also pruning the org, right? Or we have methods for pruning the org now as opposed to previous years, right? So how is that comparing with, it's not necessarily that, how many of the active, the
Yeah,
eligible
we did.
voters, yeah.
Yep. We actually did our big prune 2 years ago. I mean, we're doing it on an ongoing basis, where people fall inactive, but the really big deletion happened 2 years ago.
Mm.
I think
The
It
we're-
actually happened last year.
last year,
Was it
Yeah,
before or
yeah.
after
So
the
I mean, we
election?
had before this election, I believe after the last election,
Mm.
because we had that issue open for pruning the org members for about, I think, 2 years now, and the actual pruning happened last year sometime. I'll find out the date when it actually happened, the PR which actually pruned the members, but it happened after last elections, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, so my
Okay.
curiosity there is, we have numbers that we're looking at in terms of percentage of turnout pre-prune, and then having a method for pruning, right? Like there's going to be a variance in both directions because the pool is smaller.
Yeah, so
So-
we're doing this every year and we actually want to look at the trend of how many people vote out of eligible voters. We have to normalize against the previous year's number of eligible voters.
Yeah.
Do we want to
Good
do
point,
that?
Kat. Well, I think that what you're pointing out, Kat, I think is correct and points to the wider question of this is a multifaceted problem that we are trying to solve. And so we want a broad pool of eligible voters. We want that pool of eligible voters to be eligible because they're actually participating. And we want a lot of them to vote. And so like we kind of have to work on all of those aspects is my summary.
And to be super, super clear, still hats off to the election officers for the work that you have done and increasing the percentage. We're just
Oh.
staring at the very variables, that's all.
Oh, absolutely. I don't give ourselves credit or blame for people making their choice to vote or not vote. We just try to surface it as much as we can. And the efforts that we can do, I think we got one thing there that I think helped, and I think we should definitely repeat that. Okay, is there anything else we should talk about for turnout before we move on to comms plan?
Related, or maybe slightly off topic, is there maybe Priyanka, is there a schedule for announcements? Org banners?
Sorry, I did not get it. Like a schedule for. Oh,
So-
do
The
we
org
have a
banner
schedule
on GitHub.
already?
Yeah, as in we have now decided that the banner may be the org level banner may be a good idea, right? To do moving forward. Or is there a schedule of org related banners that we need to consider so that we don't conflict, etc.?
We don't have any such schedule. I can talk from GitHub admin perspective right now. So maybe this would be the first one we'll be starting to schedule. We don't have any such schedule right now.
Cool. Thanks.
So far we added banners as and when requested. Yeah, and it was the move to enterprise actually happened sometime early during the election cycle itself. So it's a new feature for us right now. Very
Nice.
new, yeah. But taking feedback from you, Stephen, I think we can add it to our comms document that we have right now for all other comms, emails, social media, Slack, etc. We can add a schedule there for banner announcements and coordinate that with GitHub admins.
Yeah, that'd be cool because I think that those banners would likely line up with some of the banners that we might want to put on the website.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the website ones, I don't know if we ever the website ones are like getting a approval from steering to put stuff up and not necessarily schedule based. So I agree that that would coincide really well, Stephen.
Okay. Okay, so comms plan, lots of credit to Caslin because she wrote a very detailed, when she did the role of comms officer, which I took on this year, she wrote a very detailed plan that took us through, like, when do we have to have the draft reviewed? When do we have to have the, item published? And, we followed it pretty closely. I mean, we updated it for this year, of course, and then followed it pretty closely with one exception that I'll talk about in the challenges section. And I would recommend to future election officers doing that ahead of time is a really good idea, because then you have one source of truth and it's all in one document and it's not going to get lost in all your Google Calendar alerts. So I thought that was very helpful. Any comments on, and this would be more of a question, I guess, to Priyanka and possibly Ray, as to like reviewing ahead of time or anything else about these?
I totally agree with you, and I've seen Kazan's comp plans from for other initiatives as well. I think we should continue to do the same.
+1, yeah. I have the same sentiments. Yeah, it really was helpful. In fact, I was doing EO for the very first time, so I wasn't aware what all was included in our comms. The document gave a big picture of that. So it's doing great work, yeah, for our tracking of comms as well as onboarding new EOs as well on what needs to be done as comms election officers.
Awesome. And then Priyanka, do you want to talk about how voter exceptions were handled?
Yeah, this was an idea from Josh. I think one of the Contribex meeting, he suggested to send out emails to every voter exception applicant. We started doing this. We sent out emails to inform all the voter exception applicants of their status, both accepted and denied. This was to ensure that people are aware of their voter exception status ahead of time and can cast vote, and they don't have to check the voters.yaml again and again to check whether their request is reviewed or not. Currently, this is important because we do not have a way to respond back on the Electo website to respond back in a way whether it's accepted or denied. We can just update it to as reviewed. So emails are going to help there. Yeah.
And to your point, Priyanka, I don't think that we would necessarily prioritize that as a feature for Electo. Certainly the Ben the Elder bug is more important.
Yeah.
But I mean, because it's so rare, like, this year there were 11 exception requests. So in terms of the amount of time it takes to make sure to email the individual people, that is definitely less important than some of the other Electo things that could be useful to fix.
Yeah, mostly what it is that we don't want to add an email engine to Electo because email is hard. And the email dependency is one of the most broken things about civs that makes it really hard to administer. One thing I actually wanted to ask about is in the past we've seen patterns about who's asking for an exception request, and I have been able to add certain groups of people to ones that automatically get added to the voter list. Were there any new groups in that 11 people that seem like they ought to be added to people we automatically add to the voter list?
I don't know about automatically add. Yeah, I'll defer to what Priyanka and Ray think as well, but I don't know about automatically add, but there's definitely that subset of people who work very hard on something that is slightly out of core KK and not in a K org to the point where they would be eligible. So like that's kind of the, is this a Kubernetes election or an ecosystem election? And we're calling it a Kubernetes election. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna flag. Like I think our goal. It would be curious again to Josh's point to see what the election what the exemption categories came into, because like our goal should be to turn exceptions into the standard, right? Like the exceptions should not be exceptions, right?
Yeah, but some things, because like I do remember one that I got asked about, which was somebody who's working on something that is going to become a sub-project of Kubernetes, but isn't yet. And that's not the sort of thing that we can build a case, a case for. That's definitely a one-off. And so I was just wondering, because like for example, we used to get lots of requests from the SRC.
Yeah, or could have
and then we just started adding them. If our remaining people are sort of one-offs, then we don't have anything.
Just to add, the one case, Josh, you mentioned, we had a great discussion about that, but the only rejections or denied exception requests this time happened because people did not have org membership beforehand. So otherwise, we had tried hard to include all their contributions into consideration and take a decision, but the few that we denied were people who did not have org membership. We also tried to reach out to people to figure out org membership if they were already doing great contributions, just that it did not happen in time for the selection. So that was also one of the case. Another thing, your early question, who are the people we are getting exception requests? Two areas I felt this time, few of the emeritus folks in different groups, like they have been pretty active, emeritus in governance area especially. We got exception requests from them, and few SIG security folks who are not on SRC, but again, they are active and maybe their contributions are not tracked on GitHub. So those are also some other exception requests we received here.
Actually, I have a question about that, which is if somebody is in SIG leadership, I guess I thought for whatever reason that was one of our auto exception categories. Am I, without checking that myself, I guess I don't know off the top of my head, but I sort of would assume if somebody is sitting there being a chair or tech lead for a SIG, that should be an exception if it isn't. Is that something that I'm misremembering?
It shouldn't be an exception. They should, one SIG leader should be part of the org.
Oh, yeah.
And actively contributing, so they shouldn't be flagged that way. I think where we have maybe seen it in the past is instances where working groups have been involved, working group leads that have not been as active in direct SIG work that don't get flagged immediately. Are the working groups just spawning? But again, I don't manage these docs or process, so
Yeah, well, we talked a while ago when we were adding the SRC, and that's really look at the issue. One of the things we talked about was just doing a sweep of everybody in SIGs.yaml and automatically adding them to the voter pool. But then people brought up the fact that we're often very slow to prune working groups that are defunct. That is, working groups that no longer exist. And for that reason, that's not part of the process.
Yeah, sorry, I should have wrong governance, user groups. When we had user groups, that was one of the bigger problems because like a lot of the user groups have shifted up to like CNCF level or been spun down. For the most part, the working groups that we have today are active. But there have been instances where the working groups have entered some state of dormancy, and same goes with the leadership's org relevancy, right?
So as part of one of the things that we did when putting the voters.yaml together And I believe Priyanka was more directly involved in the technical aspect of it this year, so she can speak to that. But as I recall, the directions said something like, go pull the names from this, that, and the other file, you know, people who are in SRC, et cetera, so that they get automatically included. And so I'm just kind of wondering, should we be making sure, with deduplication, of course, to your point, Stephen, but should we be making sure that people who are in SIG leadership also do get automatically included?
I think sigs.yaml is a reasonable pull, right? The places where I would double check for, you know, for staleness, and I think is around working groups. But every other governance group are the top level governance groups, so like SIGs and committees, definitely should automatically not require an exception.
Okay, I'm gonna put an action item for myself to figure out what process we need to go through to ensure that that's the new rule, because that seems very reasonable. Somebody's putting the time in to help run a SIG.
And user groups shouldn't be an issue anymore since they basically don't exist.
Yeah, though we'll need to revisit this because there's an item open waiting for round to its in community that we should be adding sub-project leadership to sigs.yaml. And if we do that, then we'll need to revisit automatically adding people, because then we'll be in the situation again where we have groups that are potentially defunct that are in sigs.yaml. But right now, those are not in there, so it would not be a problem if we were to do the election today.
Yeah, so I would say that, yeah, I mean, yeah, we should discuss, because I would say that if someone is recognized as a SIG sub-project lead, then they are active. Given that sub-project, I mean, at least at this point in time, because sub-project leads are relatively new. That listing in sigs.yaml, it does exist today.
Okay. Well, can we just open an issue on this and we can work out the
Yeah,
details?
yeah.
All right, so welcome Caslin. Welcome Caslin ×2. We have double Caslin, it's wonderful. We are just now talking about eligibility, and we're moving on to saying how great Caslin is, which is to say the fact that you had a lot of step-by-step schedule stuff from last year that I was able to convert to this year was incredibly helpful. And Christoph also, who couldn't make it to this meeting, noted that that was very helpful. So I recommend people who are EOs in the future definitely do that. And then Electo seemed to work pretty well. So yay, Josh, yay team. One bug highlighted, but that worked pretty well. Before we move on to the things to improve, triple Caslin. Before we move on to the things to improve, do we have anything else to highlight in the things that we want to make sure that we do again?
I guess I would like to ask Josh, in your direction, what help is there, like, what help do you need around Electo?
I still need somebody to help me finish building out a comprehensive test suite for Electo, because the biggest desired change, which is to fix the case sensitivity problem, requires full testing of all functions of Electo, which we do not currently have, because that can break things everywhere. And we tried a couple of hackish versions of fixing the case sensitivity problem, and it results in bugs where some interfaces are case sensitive and others are not, which is worse than being at least consistently annoying. So
yeah,
Laura was helping me on that, and then she had to change jobs. So
gotcha.
All right, so that sounds like a place where adding tests to Electo is this kind of like a thing we could surface in that monthly meeting that Caslin was just emailing about, of places where people could jump in and start helping.
Yeah, I mean, one of the tricks is I've tried to actually do this a couple times to the internship programs, and I found students do not get taught test development in school.
That's not
at least
accurate.
at least not ones who apply for LFX. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Right.
I am glad that your students that you experience have been taught these things, Kat. In my
Yeah,
And
experience,
if you do
students
know
are not
some,
taught
if you do
GitHub.
know some, I can find internship money. So, so direct them my way.
I'm just kind of like, did they use GitHub at college? Maybe they didn't use GitHub at college.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know where that's coming from. Because
There
I was
are
absolutely
definitely-
taught test-driven development in school.
I went to school in the ancient times, in the long, long ago. So
So full of students.
The new
not
contributor meeting could
only-
be anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not only students from what we've
Yeah.
seen from the one that we've run so far.
Yeah. No, it's a good call out for the new contributor orientation.
Yeah,
Because it doesn't,
maybe
it
something
doesn't
to
have
add
to
as
be a
like
student, right? Somebody
maybe something-
somebody who does Python app development as their main job could probably knock this out in a weekend. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
let's
first-
yeah, let's just be sure to like steer away from any generalizations about education and whatnot. I think we can find people who can do it. We just have not currently.
fair. Yeah. Who knows what people are being taught where, but we believe that if we put this out there, there will be some people who may want to participate. Okay. All right. I think we're to the things to improve and just about at the halfway point of the meeting. Yay. Okay. The first one that I added was, I feel like it is a very busy world and everyone has their attention put into a lot of different directions. And I think there are people who could be eligible to vote who we didn't reach or we didn't remind. And I have a comment thread in the sidebar with Ben the Elder about maybe it's not possible for us to, I don't want to like spam people, but of course the GitHub notification bar is great. And maybe Stephen or others can point to how we did it in the past, because we definitely sent out email through Civs, I guess, to give people a ballot, but maybe that was the problem. Yeah.
Sorry, what was the ask?
The question is like, is there a better way to surface information to people individually, perhaps via email or other, who specifically to tell them you are eligible to vote, you should go vote?
I think, maybe, and apologies if this exists somewhere, but like, welcome to Kubernetes. This is your guidebook kind of doc that says like, here are all the things that you, like, new job, you start something like, here are your benefits and here are the things that you can look up and the portals and yada, yada, yada. The schedule for our holidays are going to be blah, 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 blah. I think as a new contributor there, we've got 30 plus, governance groups and various places to contribute across the across the community. I think things are very, very easy to miss. I don't think that, the voter turnout has to do with active negligence as much as
No.
it does. We've just, there was a thing that was not on my radar this week or this month, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think I don't know if we have a one-stop shop doc of saying like, here are the things that you can do now that you're part of this community. But maybe an idea.
I think we often forget how, as much as we hate to admit this, but how often siloed in our smaller SIGs we are in the community, where, especially coming from the docs end, I've got a lot of folks in docs who only do doc stuff and have no idea what else is going on in the rest of Kubernetes, maybe. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of other SIGs. And so maybe this is something for the election officers that they can possibly do to like roadshow this information during the election period, like turning up to community meetings to tell people, hi, there's an election on, everyone click on this right now and see if you're eligible. Like literally like putting it in front of them at the places that they show up.
And like literally go through each SIG Slack channels and remind them about voter eligibility and the election coming up.
I know you said, Bridget, you didn't want to spam, but I actually think that type of spam
That's-
that is specifically for those like smaller communities is good.
And Stephen.
Agree and disagree. I would say that this can be a responsibility for SIG leadership or for the governance group leadership. I think the election officers should endeavor to inform all of the SIGs of the deadlines. SIG leadership should be paying attention to that. They should come to the SIG the SIG leads call and make sure people are aware. I think SIG should be carrying that message throughout their groups. Personally, it's the election officers group is a very small group, and to ask them to do that for all of the channels that we have, or for all the governance groups, when we can federate that
Wait,
out.
Stephen, are you saying I can't go to 18 more meetings this week? You underestimate me.
I mean, you can, but do you want to, is the question.
I love seeing all your smiling faces. Priyanka?
I was going to bring up the topic of banners again because this time when we used banners on our GitHub org, we disabled the function to hide those banners. So it is always going to stay on your screen throughout the election period. And I believe that is a one-on-one interaction right away. There is a link to check the voter eligibility criteria. Now it does not refer to the contributors who are contributing outside of GitHub. So that's where I think outside communications will help. But I agree with Stephen that we can go to meetings maybe 1 or 2 times during the election cycle. But if we could do regular reminders throughout the election cycle via leadership, that would be helpful. Yeah.
I think Slack does have pinned topics. So, and then Josh, to your point, community calendar. I'm not sure which community calendar, but it's.
So
There's
for what
a
it's worth,
main Kubernetes community calendar, and we could easily drop a remember to vote calendar item on there.
So for what it's
you would-
worth, I have no idea what the community calendar is.
Yeah, I don't think most
and-
people use that.
and Slack banners, Slack or Slack pinned messages are going to be individual to the channel. Sorry, Natalie, you have your.
Yeah, Stephen, sorry, I'm gonna, oh, that's my doorbell. 1 second, I have to come back in a minute.
We are seeing my inability to spell, which is amazing and great. And yeah, so anyway, these are a lot of great ideas. We should definitely try to put this out there more. This is the retro item that I wanted to get to, which is I definitely didn't send as many reminder emails. And some of that had to do with the way we lined up tasks and then how some of them needed to be done in real time. The way we had the calendar intersect with the calendar of the actual world, as well as the calendar of my work travel where I was unavailable for a huge amount of time. And then Priyanka had a good idea about pre-scheduling. And my only caveat there is I do feel like anytime anybody pre-schedules an email, it doesn't come out the way you intend because you don't recheck it at the end before it goes. So that's kind of an additional administrative burden that would need to be a solution there. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just that maybe having a primary, secondary,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
scheduling some mixture of that might help us here. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, there was a little bit of a gap there where usually in the past you got like 5 or 6 reminder emails and instead you got like 2. And that was a human unavailability that led to that.
Yeah, we have something in SIG release. I am fuzzy on the details at this point. That sends out reminders regarding like patch releases. we can likely leverage some of that magical technology. And then it's just a matter of having the text in a GitHub repo somewhere. I think we're doing something similar for Twitter comms, right?
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, since you just mentioned comms, I will, before we jump to the next very interesting topic, I want to mention that I didn't do a lot with I barely even touch Twitter anymore. So like I didn't do a lot with the social media side. We did have a wonderful contributor who was working on that, but I think we need to make sure he's in the EO channel or something, because it felt like we didn't talk to contribute comms as much as we would have in the past when it was literally Caslin. And yeah, that was kind of a gap of the discussions with the person who did the comms. Okay. Anything else about comms before we get back to our next topic?
Sorry, I'm back. I just wanted to kind of raise the point that
Yes.
I was about to make from a previous
Oh, yes,
topic. I'm so
absolutely.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, Stephen, you had mentioned that you think that it should be on the SIG leadership to socialize the info about eligibility to vote. And I kind of disagree with that, in the sense that if the Kubernetes steering committee wants to socialize that more people can vote, it's on them, actually, in the sense of us in our SIGs have like a lot of work to do, like the technical direction and work of the project. And I think it goes into a lot of the possible mysteriousness of what Kubernetes steering even does, to then put some of that back on SIG leadership to push for voting, as opposed to maybe even steering themselves, going out and socializing that info in whatever way that they feel like they can. But I think putting another thing on SIG leadership outside of a possible reminder or two in a meeting, I think that's a big ask that technically SIG leadership shouldn't have to care about.
So just to clarify, the elections subproject is a part of the SIG contributor experience. And that's where that process runs through, right? So steering does get out information as well to prospective people, and I'm sure you've spoken to steering members in the past about it. I'm saying that SIG leadership can be an additional lever to federate the knowledge, right? So just adding a reminder at the beginning of your meeting or something while we're doing an election cycle is what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
So Stephen, you're saying this is like the public radio member pledge drive. Gotcha. We're getting a tote bag,
Exactly.
we're getting an
Exactly.
umbrella.
Yeah.
All right. Kat.
Yeah, just to like slightly add some flavor to that, I think it gets weird with SIG leads being the ones responsible to remind their SIGs to vote when those SIG leads are the ones running. I question whether or not that's appropriate, unless it's kind of just like a blurb added in the regular agenda and not something that's being like pushed by the SIG lead. So like in the case of Natalie and I,
That's how big.
yeah, like we didn't mention it in our respective SIGs. I didn't do it in any of the release team meetings because I was the one running.
And that's fair and that's commendable, Kat. And I think that to your point, if we make it a standard thing, all SIGs say, then you are recused from electioneering, because instead you are saying, hey, I am not going to be biased, but I suggest you go and make your voice heard. And then you don't have to say, and I'm blah. You just say, this is the official text. Go make your voice heard. So, and Kubernetes steering.
What I've done in the past for SIGOps and SIG-CLI, we usually have like an announcement section at the beginning of the meeting that we try to use for that kind of announcements, for like, oh, there are steering elections, so just remember to vote. I'd be curious about steering members going through everywhere and advertise, because a similar problem like Kat mentioned with regards SIG leads, the same applies to steering members running for re-election, so a similar problem might appear. But I'm pretty sure that having like a standard election officers use this drop in your announcement, and just everyone, here's the steering and the link to the reminder email, which is usually sent to the dev.kate.io. That's what I've been doing in the past. That usually works, and it's very neutral, and it's just a simple reminder that should work probably.
For sure. Stephen.
Yeah, my hand was up regarding the electioneering comment. Just yes, we should not do
Yes.
that. Please don't do that. If I was in a situation like that, I would have someone else on SIG leadership do the announcement. And I'd
Oh, that's a
like
really
what
good
Ma-
point.
yeah, and I like what Mache said about having like this is the templatized version of it from the election officers. You know, we have agreed to minimize whatever potential electioneering sounding words are included in this. Go do the thing. Here's a list of candidates. Go crazy, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Now on to our exciting topic of, and I will read the exact text I wrote to be unbiased. We had candidates representing a range of geographies and genders, but we still ended up with less diversity overall in the results than we see in the overall Kubernetes contributor community. And I wrote this as an action item that I thought we could do better on. And I'm positive that people have many suggestions for how we can do better on this, but this is something that I've noted. And I didn't stand for election myself. So I did attempt to make sure we had an election that everybody would be comfortable in. And apparently I did not successfully make sure that we ended up with a steering that accurately represented our community. And so I would love to hear people's thoughts about how we can solve this.
I don't know how much time we have, but I would agree that it is disappointing for like I think all of our steering members are great and have been huge contributors to the community over the years. It is disappointing to see an all male body for multiple years going now. I remember uh, was it Barcelona maybe? Where or Barcelona or Valencia, I think, where Natalie put her hand up during the call during the panel and said like, "What's going on, folks? Like, what's going on?" And I think we did better around geographic representation and then threw the rest of the book out. I don't know that we're going to come up with an answer here, but I'm recognizing it as well and would love to see something different moving forward.
Go ahead.
I wonder about one topic. I'm not sure if it's on the agenda, but there's some confusion about the priorities and how you vote. And looking through results, and the same thing happened last year, and the same thing happened this year, where people vote for a single candidate and the rest is getting sevens, or the last number, whatever. I started wondering if we would force everyone to have a specific number, would that somewhat change the results? I didn't have the time to, I don't know, try it myself, what kind of results we might potentially get out of forcing people to always number candidates 1 to whatever the end will be. Will that help? I don't know. But that's one of the ideas.
I think Natalie is next.
Mine's on a slightly different topic. So Kat, if you have a response to Matcha, you go ahead.
I do. Thank you. So I suspect that the people who are only voting for one candidate and then putting either no opinion or the last number for all of the other candidates are just voting for their friend or just voting for their coworker, and they don't know or care about the other candidates and also don't care to spend the time forming an opinion about the other candidates. So the result there may just be that they randomly assign numbers for the remaining candidates rather than going with a more neutral no opinion. So I don't actually know that that would fix it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I will respond before we move to the next topic. I will respond to that by saying, I think that we've had ranked choice voting in my United States, local elections for some time. And people get very confused about how ranked choice voting works. So maybe some education about ranked choice voting is also valuable, like what it means. And how it works in practicality. If you have somebody that you like, where you rank them. Sometimes it doesn't work out and you still get a terrible mayor. Thanks a lot, Minneapolis. But
And just
okay.
responding to the response, I think ultimately, Kat's right. There's a limited amount of time that you're going to spend forming an opinion about someone, because during the election window is not the right time. You've like, if you haven't learned about that person in that time, the time that you're spending to read their profile isn't anywhere indicative to their contributions to the community, right? So ultimately we're going to fall back to popularity contests, to people we know, to areas that we work around, right? And one thing that really needs to be said, like, SIG chair, I think we've talked about this in length across the community. SIG chairs are not the same as technical leads. That's why the roles are different. They have different responsibilities. One is not better than the other. Technical leads are not necessarily the right decision for steering committee members, right? So like, that's something that needs to be held, and I'm not sure that is actually held in consideration for a lot of the people who are voting.
All right, Natalie.
Yeah, I think this comes down to the fact that, similar to the issue of the voter turnout that we discussed before, the same contributors and the same people are voting each time. I think that's kind of like the crux of what it is, where it is a very similar number of percentage each year who are voting for the same people or within their same company or organization. And it's very hard to kind of possibly change or skew some things that way. And so I think I would like to hope that improving the way that we communicate how people can vote and if they're eligible to vote could possibly work into solving some of this. Because yeah, you have a lot of very, very new contributors, let's say been in the project for a year, who have no idea that they're possibly eligible and could make a very tangible difference, given that a lot of the votes of the last couple of years have actually been like very close. So I think further diversifying our voter pool of like making sure people know they can vote is going to be part of helping this point.
Yeah. Okay, Kat.
Yeah, along the same vein with the people just voting for the candidate who works for the same company as they do. This is obviously particularly prevalent with like Google and Red Hat and formerly VMware, right? I noticed in the last retro, there was talk about getting companies to send out an email to encourage their contributors to vote. I don't think that should be allowed, because even if they're not explicitly saying, hey, the following candidates also work at Google, you should go vote in the steering election, that's the implication. It's the implication. And it's, do we want more contributors in general voting, or do we want more contributors who care voting? So I don't love the corporate involvement there, because it does basically just enforce that there is always going to be a Google steering member, there is always going to be a Red Hat steering member, there is always going to be a whichever company is the largest contributor base, whether or not their candidate is actually the best person for the job.
So I definitely see what you're saying there. And I also will offer my employer as an example of don't actually end up doing that necessarily. We might not even, I work for Microsoft for those who don't know, but we may or may not have a candidate. We certainly don't try to, you know, be like, hey, we're one of the top contributors, therefore. And I also don't think that as a corporate entity, you know, corporations aren't people and
They're not.
try to,
Yeah.
don't try to do things on the whole. But you're reminding me of something very interesting that I was actually discussing with a colleague, which was there's in the governing board, there's different kinds of seats. And it is an interesting thought to consider what if in steering, there perhaps were a seat that came out of, say, end users or something, or
As long as
came
it's
out
not
of,
as long as it's not a corporate seat, because that's
Sure, sure, sure.
dangerous. But
or what if there were a seat that came out of somebody who doesn't work at one of the top 10 listed companies? Something like that. Like,
But to interject, sorry, I mentioned something similar about the geography problem we had a couple of years ago at that same meeting where at that same steering AMA where I also called steering out to ask steering, why can't we have a definite seat for outside North America? And I got told that that was kind of just not in the spirit and not possible. So how can an end user seat be possible as well in that same vein, in that same logic? So like, I think
perhaps it's not.
Yeah. So I think it's worth actually us figuring out like what in terms of steering committee membership or appointment and like of the people who are going to be appointed to those seats, what are the parameters that we care about in terms of representation? And then from there, figure out what we can actually, and if we do care about a certain element of diversity, great, or a certain element of geographic location or end user slash contribution kind of representation, like let's figure out those parameters first before then figuring out, okay, what seat carve out should we need?
Nice. Okay. I actually would love to hear from Stephen and possibly others who have been on steering themselves about what they think of that and this topic in general. Stephen?
Yeah, I'm trying to, I'm gonna try to be politically adept here. So one, I will say that we have rules on, just going back to the previous topic, we have rules on electioneering. I know that there are companies, large companies that do send that email, and I know that email holds influence. I know that personally, what I do is, for example, we had a candidate this cycle for my company, and while we simultaneously announced, hey, this candidate is running, I think some of the questions that came up were like, hey, so what should we do? How do we vote for them, right? And it's like, in the next breath, I say, like, listen, there are rules around electioneering. We're not doing anything that looks like this. If you were a member of the Kubernetes community, like, one, here's how to determine if you are and if you were eligible to vote. And then after that, you should review the candidate profiles and make your decision. That's what you should be doing, right? Those emails and those motions do have undue influence on how these things shake out, period, right? Especially if that's coming from someone who is well known in the community or within the company or has a certain role, right?
So can we ban them? And what's the punishment if we do say, okay, employers cannot send these emails anymore, and we catch them sending that email, what is the punishment for it? I guess that's out of scope for this meeting, but
Right.
like,
I'm trying to figure out how we
it's-
would enforce that.
yeah.
One, it's out of scope for the meeting. Two, I think there should be a conversation about why this is not okay. Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's out of scope for the meeting. I do think that us discovering that that has happened is dependent on being inside of the firewall for the specific company, or someone contacting us regarding that kind of motion, which I find to be unlikely.
It's also possible the candidate didn't cause it. So the candidate could be sitting there at company A being like, I'm doing the right thing and just keeping their mouth shut. And then one of their colleagues gets overly enthusiastic and blasts out an email. And the candidate
Yeah, no,
didn't
no,
cause it.
I don't, I don't think that the action is necessarily censure towards the candidate. It's more towards the person who is initiating the action, right? Which is likely not the candidate.
Yeah.
But yes, I think out of scope for the meeting, maybe it's something that we should discuss in steering proper. The comments about having, explicit seats for, for some frame of diversity, right? I think, release team is an example of, we don't have explicit seats. We do try to, I think, within the team, and Kat, you can also speak to this, right? Within the team, we do try to find that balance. That balance is going to look different a little every cycle. What I will say is, like, former, doing KubeCon stuff, where I was around at the time that we made the rule of no manels. And to go from steering having a guaranteed spot at KubeCon, a conference that is kind of aimed after the project, to not having a spot because steering has all male representation,
For 6
is just
KubeCons in a row and counting.
is an interesting quandary. It doesn't make me feel good. I understand the rule because I helped create it. But it does not feel good. And I also think that there is a danger in a qualified seat for the sake of diversity, right? It does feel like hey, let's contact the woman to ensure that our panel is of a certain size and composition, right? So
Ooh,
I
can
have
she
mixed
moderate?
feelings. Yeah, exactly, right. So I have mixed feelings about
Take the notes each
that
time.
idea. Yeah. Do you mind taking the note? Yeah, it's I think it's potentially a slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Stephen, 100%. I think it's one of those things where a lot of the very smart and well-meaning people in the room understand that point, but the community doesn't care about that point as well, in the sense of how that representation reflects them. And I think that's okay too, as well. I think that's something that, like, people might feel uncomfortable, like, oh, another all-male steering committee, or another maybe primarily white steering committee, or another primarily North America only steering committee, etc. I think we have to sometimes just be okay with saying that actually a good chunk of our community wants that, and maybe we have to be comfortable with that discomfort too.
And Stephen, yes.
Yeah, so I did want to, there is a, sometimes you can feel like, yes, the system works. We got the result that we wanted, right? The system actually does work, which is disheartening. But I do want to call out the, because the comment has been made at least twice during this meeting, and so Caslin in the chat says people don't know what steering does, but they also may not care. Great point. And I think sometimes when we are doing what we do, we're not sure what we're doing, to be fair, right? So I think every time we have a situation like that, like, ask the question, ask us what we're working on. We're happy to talk about it in more details. The things that we don't talk about on the public meetings are things that may be sensitive, right? So that's ultimately what the what's not happening in public is. I think from the perspective of the community, I think ultimately we should not have to exist, right? And I've been having this conversation with people around around open source in general, right? If everyone was working on open source, then like OSPO would need to exist, for example, like or hopefully, right? But we know that that's not the case, right? Steering is a body of last resort, right? It's the delegation process is, does something have to be done in the community? Question mark. If yes, is there another governance body that already covers this topic? Right? If yes, then that topic should go to that governance body. If no, steering should make a determination on how and when we should do something about it, right? If it's, a lot of questions have come up around funding, for example, and a lot of the questions around funding have been related to infrastructure. And now SIG, Kate's Infra exists. That I'm giving that as one example, right? But the idea is that we're meant to be a bit of a router, right? For things that are coming into the community. We're meant to speak publicly about topics that are related to the community, that may be sensitive, that may be considered political. Not political in the political sense, but like political in the community sense, I guess, right? But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I think any member of the steering committee would feel the same. Just tell us what we can help clarify, and we're happy to put that to paper.
All right, so to summarize, it is disappointing to see an all-male steering election happen yet again, and we can certainly attempt a bunch of things to make sure that a broader array of people have opportunities. Something else I noticed, just when I voted, I read all the bios thoroughly, carefully, and I noticed that we had a very impressive slate of candidates, and they had done a lot of cool things. And I think that if we want to create a possibility of people across the gender spectrum, which is of course not a binary, to have the opportunity to do all those cool things, to be those great candidates, that's kind of I think we not only have to try to make sure that we get a broader range of candidates just by going out and seeking them, and each of us talking to somebody and saying, you should run, but also, are we encouraging all those people in our communities? Like, I hope we are, but yeah. Kat, I think, was first.
Yeah, so we do have a pretty decent representation of people across the gender spectrum within project leadership. It's half of SIG release leadership and half of SIG docs leadership, and I think more than half of SIG security leadership. The issue is that most of us have already tried running once or twice and lost to a man by a very narrow margin, and we are tired of losing. That's why Ian doesn't run anymore, for instance. Just burnt out on losing to what some of us perceive as an inferior candidate. So it just, you get burned out on it. Feels bad at a certain point. And so it's not an issue of supply at all. We have plenty of people who aren't men who are qualified and exceptionally talented and have ran this time and have run before. We just got tired of the community doing what it has done for the last 3 years.
Okay. Stephen?
Yeah, so I think if you look into the results over the last many years, one of the commonalities that you would see is that someone from SIG contributor experience was like, that spot was a lock, right? Like there are certain company representations, there are certain SIG representations that you expected to see in the candidate pool and to be members of standing by the end of the election. I've been very happy to see as a co-chair of the SIG that more SIG release folks are running. That's like really cool to me, right? But I think the commonality between those two SIGs is that for some people, that's their ingress point to the community, right? Are we, and like, so those candidates are like being seen all of the time by new contributors, are being seen all the time by contributors who, so I think SIGs who are getting out there in front of their respective communities have a better shot in general. How can we do that for every SIG? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's one of the things that's been on my mind. There are, you can guess how the slots are going to play out roughly every election.
Yeah, and you know, back to Kat's point, this is not a pipeline problem, except that everything, including the pipeline, is a problem. But when the pipeline leads to doesn't happen again and again and again, you get kind of tired of being in that pipeline. And so if we can do what Stephen is talking about and ensure that we're setting everyone, not just the people who might be in a very specific company or SIG, but everybody else as well, setting them up for success in terms of their visibility, that's what we could try to do to level the playing field there. So let's see this. I'm going to move the link from Josh up, which is interviews, blogs, etc., with the candidates. Something we didn't do this time, and I think it's been on a list, and we've done it literally never. Because at least I certainly was not going to have that kind of time myself as an election officer. Maybe that's a question for Caslin. Is that something where SIG Contribex comms or SIG Contribex elections can make sure to feature things on the candidates?
Theoretically, the challenge would be having someone to actually do it and making it actually happen. But when you said that, that was my first thought. Like, comms could run a project where we make sure that we interview all of the candidates during an election cycle and put out content on it. And what kinds of content would that be? The challenge is always, do we have someone who is willing and able to do it when it's needed? And can we define it clearly enough that the people who are available can do it? So theoretically, it's possible. Would it actually happen would require work.
I think there's a relatively low overhead way to handle that, which is the way like 99% of the press interviews get handled for the release team, and the way I suspect a lot of actual political elections work, which is one set of questions is written and it is distributed via email in a doc for all candidates to answer. And the ones who respond get a blog that is literally just their answers to the same questions that every other candidate was asked. Like, obviously that's still like some amount of work, but it's significantly lower overhead than doing like a one-on-one interview with potentially a dozen candidates, and also a little bit more fair because everybody is being given the exact same questions.
That's a great point, and I would definitely say get all the answers in from everybody before you start publishing them, so that people
Sure.
aren't writing a blog that's a response to somebody else's blog,
Yeah.
which would give them an unfair edge. Okay. All right. Is there anything else we should talk about candidate representation and our possible solutions for that before we move on to the last couple of topics?
Question around time check. I don't know how long this meeting is supposed to be.
We're
but-
already way over, which some of us have
Okay.
already told people to handle our other meetings.
Okay, all right, just
We're almost
checking.
done.
Okay,
But, yeah.
I'm happy to keep going. I just wanted to make sure for other people.
People have been dropping, and it is what it is. It's important to talk, even if we have to finish it asynchronously. But okay. Priyanka had put a topic, and she did have to drop, but she pointed out the timing problems around the candidate nomination period. This affected Natalie for sure because of travel, and required a great deal of juggling to make, and it did work out, and she did end up successfully in as a candidate, but I'm a little bit concerned about candidate nomination period during European holiday, because I think the meme is Europe says, I'll see you in September. Whereas like, the US is like, I'm going on vacation. I'll check my email every 10 minutes. And so I feel like that if we want to be, and there's also a bunch of other holidays, et cetera, that we were working around. It was very important for us to not have the election finishing, for example, during important Jewish holidays, because then people would completely be offline. So like there were things that we were trying to get, work around, but the nomination period specifically was a problem. And I think Natalie has opinions on this.
Yeah, so firstly, big thanks to you, Bridget, and also Kat, who was the only person I could get on Signal to answer a message from me to help me put that up. I appreciate it a lot. And the reason that I could do that, I want to say as well, is that because I had ample notification that that period was coming up, and that I knew I already had vacation plans, so that I could actually do some of that work beforehand. And so I just want to highlight how important it is that we're getting or the community is getting a pre-notification of the election period coming, so that there's planning around that time frame for people. That was the only way that I was able to like do the work that I could for that, and I think it worked. That was really, really good. But I think to a point that I think Maciej has made in a thread in the past, it's going to be very hard to meet every single person's requirements around time off and holidays and so on as well. And I like, as a Europe person, I'm kind of used to just capitulating and dealing with the deadlines that we're supposed to for the rest of the world. So just having ample notification already that this is going to be the period of election or like of nomination, and it's coming up in X time and blah, blah, blah. That was really helpful. So I just want to say big up for that in particular of a possible solving of that problem.
Yeah. Yes. I cannot tell which order hands are in. I'm sorry.
So
It's definitely
yeah,
Stephen first.
Okay.
it's left to right in the order. So the or whoever gets pulled up to the list of participants first is
Oh, it's like reordering people. Okay. I'm
Yeah,
used to there being numbers and teams, so it's like, yeah.
So I think another component of that is does this mean, or potentially an idea is to allow if you have tacit agreement from someone who is nominating you, right? Because we do a lot of self nominations. I think for Natalie's case, she was nominated, right? Is there a space that we can allow for the person who's doing the nomination, as long as they have agreement from the person being nominated, to also potentially put up content for them, right? Or propose content for them, because that's if the content was pre-written and in a case where like I don't have access to internet,
Yeah.
I can at least send it to someone, and that person who is nominating me can put up the PR for me, right?
Yeah, we had made the pre-arrangement that if necessary, that's exactly what we were going to do. And honestly, at this point, I don't remember if Natalie successfully put the PR in, or Paris did, or Kat did.
It was you, Bridget.
Was it me? See, I can't
Yeah.
even remember. I just remember like, yes, it was written by Natalie and sent as, a Google Doc at a time. And like, I know I'm going to have zero internet.
Yeah, it was one of
Yeah,
those
and then I
fun
PR'd it
things
in with
where-
approval.
Yeah, for the whole world to hear. I'm from an island in Croatia where our specific house, like in our like little inlet, has zero internet. It's really, really nice to go on holiday because no one can contact me. It's very nice. But of course, the issue is that I can't contact anyone either. And so fun things where like my GitHub app would not work, but every now and then I could send an email or a message. So things like that, for example. So yeah, big appreciation. And I think that could possibly help, especially because I was able to every couple of days drive to town and get internet and like do the things I needed to do. So yeah.
Very, very sympathetic to that, because I like to go canoeing in the boundary waters between the United States and Canada. There's a whole bunch of lakes, and one of the major features is there is no electricity and there is no cell signal, and you're just camping, and no one can reach you for days and days and days. And it's wonderful. It's very relaxing. Okay, Kat, you are unmuted. Do you have something else you want to add here before we continue?
Nope, go ahead.
Yep, so making, and then the point that Priyanka made also about nominations coming in at the end, that's actually not surprising to me. And trying to avoid holidays is best we can do for that. We talked already about the Ben the Elder bug, the case sensitivity of GitHub usernames. And, you know, it's a known issue. Ray, I would love to hear, oh yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so real quick, on the nomination stuff, there are some people, including myself, who have waited and very close to the last minute to submit nominations so that none of my content is stolen. So that can be a factor as well.
I did that too. And
Yeah.
I suspect Natalie did too.
Wait, so none of your content is what?
We wait until
If-
the very last minute to submit so that none of the other potential people running can steal our content from our bios.
Wouldn't it be obvious if your bios were the same?
Oh, if they're
Okay,
taking
I mean-
inspiration from the kinds of things we put in our bio, we don't
Interesting,
want to.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm just imagining like they have a clone of it and you're like, the commit logs show that ours went in way before theirs, which makes them look bizarre. But yeah,
as someone who's run a few times, I have noticed similarities in the past.
Huh.
So
all right. Okay, all right. And then Ray, I would love to hear your thoughts about like because wait, did you act as an alternate? No, maybe I'm imagining this.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
I
was
believe
an
you acted as an alternate. About what the confusion was and where you would like clarification there that Christoph
Yeah,
brought up.
so as an first time alternate as well, so I was trying to get my my bearings on what the election process where election officer duties were, or the alternate election officer duties were, and like where I could. So I kind of felt like I was a fly in the wall, but I also wanted to help where necessary. So like one area was help reviewing all the comms drafts, and that's also where it was great insight as well, because they also help outline the election process or the schedule, and at a very high level. So it was just, but I wasn't aware of like should I be reviewing, making comments, making suggestions on those comms drafts, and because as I understood it as an alternate, it's just kind of be sitting on the bench, as I would like to say, and just kind of fly on the wall and just jumping in when I'm needed. But I wanted to take some initiative and participate as an alternate election officer in some way. So it was kind of vague to where so I was like, oh, can I? I'm sorry for making some suggestions, but I did. So hopefully that was okay. So I wanted to. So it'll be helpful, like say, I guess it's hard to a little one-liner on what expectations of alternates are, or like where and when they can participate. But that's something that I would also like to PRs or to make a PR to, and from my experience as an alternate, into the handbook.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. And I was obviously very happy to have you comment on docs and notice things that I was screwing up or copying and pasting from the past. I kind of wonder if that relates to the next item, which is I had completely forgotten about the blog post and then ended up just doing a modification of the previous years. That certainly was not the most exciting, innovative thing I could have written. But maybe election alternates could help, for example, craft the blog post ahead of time. Stuff that like you're not in the direct line of running the election, but it's you have all the context to help write a really good blog post, stuff like that. Would that
Absolutely.
be of interest, do you think?
Yes, to me, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And then we already discussed that the meeting link for the retro didn't work, which I have no idea why. I was messaging you, Caslin, and thank you for joining, but like, do we know if the meeting that we created had something? Did I copy paste something wrong, or do we know what happened?
I think I just copied the old calendar invite and assumed that the meeting would
Oh.
be an active one.
Oh.
I did
Okay,
not
that
think
would-
to check, which I should have thought of.
Oh, see, I thought you made one, which Now we
I
have
did
to
not
add
make
to
a
the checklist, make
there's
one.
two things
Yeah.
that you have to do with meetings, is one is the calendar and one is the Zoom, and they're completely separate.
And Stephen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say regarding the blog post and Kat's previous idea of maybe finding a way to weave the two together, right? Of like, hey, we've got this thing happening and our candidates, here's some of the topics that our candidates are already thinking about, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to, hey, Kazan, I wanted to just ask a clarifying question of your comment in the chat there. When you're saying that you need to make a case to your boss for your work to support you as a candidate, what do you mean by that?
Yes. So I'll tell my story of this. Something I said in the chat is that the submission time frame for candidates this time was less than 4 weeks. There were like 3.5 weeks where it was open. And I had spent like months building it up with my boss that I'm going to go for this. This is a 2-year long commitment. You're currently allowing me to use 20% of my work time for open source work. By doing more steering work, I may want to increase the amount of work time that I'm spending on open source to 30%. Is that okay? My boss was totally on board. We had discussed it and then my boss announced that she was changing teams and we were going to have a different boss. And that change happened like a week before the deadline. And I had not gotten around to writing down all of the conversations that I had had with my boss about like, here's what's going to change, here's why we're going to do it, and all of that to make sure that it was supported from a business perspective. And so when the deadline came up, I was out for the second half of the week and my boss had just changed. And I was like, so remember, my old boss had told you, my new boss, that I was going to do this and that it was fully supported and we had discussed it all. And they were like, that
Yeah.
was enough for me to be like, I really should have finished all of this work beforehand. So yeah, that's the story.
Cool. Thanks for explaining. I totally get that. I think I'm glad that you explained because that could totally be misconstrued as I won't run at all unless my company supports. And this is a role that is supposed to be regardless of what company you work for, you represent the community kind of thing. And I think that's something that can get lost a little bit in terms of how a lot of the kind of campaigning goes behind closed doors or whatever. But it's also part of the reason that in the project itself, we build in those guidelines of, you know, only max 2 people from X company so that we don't have that extra kind of influence and so on. So I just wanted to kind of just very openly being like, I totally understand that because you do want to do some of that work, obviously, during your like work time. I'm the same too, but also that there would clearly be stuff outside of work time for steering that would happen as well.
And that was my expectation, had been discussed as well, but it was just all a lot right at the end of the cycle, and there was not time to parse through it all.
That's a really good point that Natalie makes too. And I'm glad that Caslin clarified because yes, of course, any open source project or anything we participate in, there are going to be times we have to participate during a time that's less convenient or not our usual workday. But I also will say that the part of this where I'm sitting here and it's 11:33 in the morning on a Wednesday is 100% work time. I am doing this. I'm participating to chop wood and carry water to help run this election, and it's retro as part of my paid employment. And if I had to do all of it during times outside of my paid employment, I would 100% not, because I have family and relaxation and sleep and cats that require a lot of attention while I'm, not working. So like, I do want to make sure that we set the expectation to employers who benefit from all of this work, that they sure as heck better support their employees who are going to carve out time to work on this. Because if the employer is going to have the benefit of, being represented, they certainly better be carving out time for their employees to make time for it during their workday as part of their job. Because otherwise, good luck finding people who have all of the spare time as well as full-time employment. That seems so. I don't want to set the expectation people have to participate in open source governance strictly on their own time and dime. That I'm just putting that out there in case anyone watches this recording. That is an unrealistic expectation. So please ensure your employers support you, because otherwise you have to volunteer all the time, which isn't fair to you. Yes, Kat.
I don't think she was implying that your like employer shouldn't like allow you to do this on company time. She's implying that it potentially sounded like Caslin would have had the like pressure from her employer
Wow.
to do this for Google's clout, and that they would have like been doing work in the background to make sure that she gets the seat. That's what's a problem, right?
Right.
And that's not what happened. But that's what like internal prep work could have sounded like if Caslin hadn't clarified what she meant by that. So she's definitely, your employer should be like allowing you to do this on your company time. I currently am unemployed and doing this. And that's, it doesn't feel excellent. But yeah, no, Natalie was not implying that like we should all be doing this for free out of the goodness of our hearts on our weekends when we could be like drinking beer and like fishing,
Very true, very true. Okay, does anyone have anything else that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to talk about? Fishing, apparently.
I like fishing.
I'm a vegetarian, so I feel like if I caught
throw 'em back.
fish, the cats would be very excited to meet the fish. They would have a lot of opinions about the fish. This little monster, come here, kitty. This little monster would love to meet some fish and grab them and say, fish, yum. Right? Anything else that we should discuss? Okay. Thank you all. Very much appreciated. And I hope that we have a great election next year as well.
Thanks for running this, Bridget, and thanks everyone, election officers, steering folks, everyone for being involved.
Yeah, this is super cool. Thank you.